Did you find the video?
You saw the video, didn't you, Jared?
No, I didn't. Did it play? I didn't see
Oh,
it.
really?
No,
Did you
not
guys
at
see
all.
it, Anna?
Yeah, I saw it. It was
Did you
awesome.
see it? Okay,
intro?
thanks, Yishai. Yeah.
Oh my god! I
saw the intro.
I was just sitting here like everybody blinking at each other for a second. I was so confused. Anyway, welcome back to the Open Peace Podcast, everybody. We have Yishai Fleisher with us today. He's the international spokesman for the Jewish community of the Hebron settlers. Said you are a New York trained lawyer and rabbi.
Correct.
So yeah. So just start off, explain to our audience about where you live, a little while, give us a little backstory.
Sure. I was born in Haifa, Israel. My parents were Russian Jews. I was born in 1976. I was actually born the same day that the Entebbe airplane was hijacked, and
Oh, wow.
had my Brit Milah the very day that it was liberated. So I think that had something to do with my personality. And I lived here to the age of 8 in Haifa as a secular Jew, secular Israeli. But then my parents moved to New Jersey, to America, and I grew up in New Jersey from 8 till 17. I always yearned to come back, to go to the Israeli army, and to come back to, I guess, take back my Israeliness that was lost. And at 17, I came back. I went to Yeshivat Maleh Adumim. In the meantime, in America, we became observant Jewishly, and that happens a lot of times. And I came back by myself to Israel, and then I went to the army. I was in the paratroopers. I was in Lebanon. I was injured in Lebanon by a roadside bomb. And I was there until 96, and went back to yeshiva for a little bit. Then I went to Yeshiva University. My parents were still in America, and I went back to Yeshiva University and then Cardozo Law for 7 years. In the first year of law school, I met a gal, and her and I were alike. We were both pro-Israel. She had started the first pro-Israel campus club that ever existed at Cardozo campus, which is weird because it's a Jewish Yeshiva University campus, but there was never a pro-Israel club. And it was called Chai, Cardozo Heightening Awareness for Israel. She started it. And I was the first to bring Birthright to the campus. And we got together. And lo and behold, we liked each other. We decided to get married. And long story short, we came at the end of the second year of law school. Law school is 3 years. And we came to get married in Israel, in Hebron, in 2002 during the height of the Second Intifada. And we had an awesome wedding there. There hadn't been weddings in a long time there because of the violence. And this wedding actually, I'm told, kickstarted Jewish weddings back at the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs, the mothers and the fathers, the first family of the Jewish people. And that's in Hebron. And then we went back, finished law school. And when we finished law school, I kind of got a job at Arutz Sheva, Israel National Radio. And they called me into Israel. The only I had to agree to one thing. One caveat was that I had to move to Beit El, Israel. And who knew? I didn't know in America, New York City, where was Beit El or what was it really all about. But it's a great community, a so-called settlement just a few kilometers north of Ramallah. And that's where Arutz Sheva, Israel National News and Radio, was located. We moved there for 7 years. Then we moved to the Mount of Olives, where we lived for 7 years also. And the Mount of Olives is a very special neighborhood right east of the Temple Mount of the old city of Jerusalem. And we lived there for 7 years. We were just there for this Rosh Hashanah, very special place. Not an easy place, but very meaningful and historic place. And then a few years ago, I got a job as the spokesman for the Jewish community of Hebron, the so-called settlers of Hebron. And that's a job that I have, in my opinion, a great privilege and honor to have, and had to move a little bit south from Jerusalem, although I miss Yerushalayim, the holy city. But we had to move a little bit south to the Gush Etzion area. So I live right down the Gush Etzion area, and that's right in between Hebron and Bethlehem and Jerusalem. It's right in between these ancient, historical, and holy cities. And so that's where my life is today. I got 3 kids, still serve in the army sometimes. Although less so now. But I serve in a different way today, which is helping hold on to this parcel, which is much maligned by parts of the world. And so my job is to do what I think that one of the missions of this generation, which is to fight a battle I call the narrative war, the war of the narratives. And so one of my jobs is really to identify the narrative war and to fight and to help give better PR and better clarity about what the Jews of Hebron and therefore all the settlers are actually doing.
So I noticed you said, sorry, Anna, no, go ahead.
Oh, no, I have to ask because where in New Jersey are you from?
Wayne, New Jersey.
Okay.
I think they may have won the 1976 Little League championship. They I think in Wayne were famous for floods and also for the great Willowbrook Mall. But other than that, not a lot to write home about.
Did you go to a Jewish school in New Jersey by any chance?
I certainly did.
I'm just wondering because
I went to Hillel, and then I went to what became Kushner. It was HYA.
Okay.
Then it became JKHA, and it's the Kushner, the famous Kushner, that we read about in the last few years. Well, that family sponsors a very important Jewish school in Livingston, New Jersey. At the time, it was at West Caldwell, and that's where we went to school. And I bust in. Yeah, it really formed a lot of my Jewish knowledge anyway.
Yeah. So you born in Jersey. You ever
no, born in Haifa.
Jersey.
Born
in Haifa. I live in Haifa now, but you were raised in Jersey. You ever been to Delaware?
Sure, I've been to Delaware, the Delaware Water Gap, and did whitewater rafting in Delaware. I don't remember a lot to talk. I don't think you brought me on to talk about Delaware much, but I think I've been there.
Well, I mean, I'll always take the opportunity.
Much more interesting is my wife, who's from Texas, and yeah, she's a Texan, and Texans make great settlers. And we just went back to Texas just now, and we really hung out. We hung out in Houston, and then we went to a place called Palestine, Texas. And it was a lot of fun. The real Palestinians, Palestine, Texas, and we were in Dallas, and then we went to hang out in Oklahoma with the American Indians, the natives. They call themselves American Indians, by the way. So we hung out with the natives there and really learned a lot there. So I think that's more exciting than New Jersey. But of course, New Jersey is right next to the great city of New York, which is, I think, one of the world's greatest cities. And I had a lot, and I had the great merit and privilege to live in Manhattan for 7 years while I was at Yeshiva University, and consider myself in part, weirdly enough, I consider myself in part a New Yorker. And I think anybody who's lived in New York has, a bit of that in them.
Well, I feel you there completely, but a little bit opposite and a little bit controversial. I'm from London, spent many years in London, and see myself also as a Londoner. And I will definitely say to anyone listening, London's better than New York, guys. I've been to both.
No,
London's
lies.
There's one simple reason why London is not as good as New York. There's one simple
Here we
reason.
go.
And that's just simple. It's simple. At London, the tube stops running at midnight. And in New York City, the subway keeps going all night long.
So
right there. It's right there.
It just breaks down
I got
like twice a week.
Two things for you. We've got night tube now. There's already a night tube on certain days.
Oh, welcome to the 21st century.
On certain days? On certain days?
Certain days. And our museums are free. I think you have to pay over there in New York for it.
That's true, but that's true. But listen, London is a great town. I've had great experiences in London. My wife loves England. She loves England. And the best thing about London is that it's close by. You could always pop in, and it's a great and awesome city. And it's, I think, one of the capitals of Europe, really. The only difference is really the Jewish feeling there. Like London is a great global city, but it's not a Jewish city. There are Jews there, but they're kind of, they always were, they weren't the heart of the city. In New York, it's different. When you come to New York, you can feel that this city has a DNA of a Jew. The Jewish people are part and parcel of this city. They help build it. They help shape it. Everything. You know what I mean? It's part of from Ed Koch to Woody Allen to Bagel and Nosh and the whole thing. It's just to Steinfeld. It's just, there's something in the DNA of New York City which is very comfortable for Jewish people, and we're just part of that. We've built that city in part. Yeah. So that's a different feeling.
There was a joke my grandfather always told me, which is that the average New Yorker speaks more Yiddish than the average Jew nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, when you get on a subway in New York City and there's a Chinese person, a black person, a Spanish person, Korean person, and you with a kippah on your head, that's a snapshot of New York. That's normal. In London, you're not going to feel that.
And everybody's talking about how they're schwitzing and having to schlep everything back and forth.
That's right. So it's really part of it. But anyway, to me, the only city that matches up in its energy, it doesn't match. Jerusalem does not match New York in its its grandness and its and its power and its financial abilities. And New York is New York. But in terms of raw energy, I find that Jerusalem gives me that juice. You know what I mean? It's got that like global capital feeling, like something's happening here, and it's like a live wire. I have friends who complain that Jerusalem is too intense, but I like intense. So I
see what you mean, Yishai. And there's a Jerusalem syndrome, right? If I'm not mistaken, certain people that visit Jerusalem become overwhelmed with emotions, and it really is something that personally I think everyone should make a visit over here and visit the holy city and see the sights and get a feel for the place for themselves, and not just listen to the news and the different narratives. Labriut. One thing before we did segue over into London, New York, the big battle between the Brits and the Americans, I wanted to ask you about this battling of narratives that you spoke about earlier, and I noticed that you said so-called settlements as well, because obviously it's a controversial issue out there in the world. How do you battle these different narratives, and how do you think we can come to an understanding about each other's narratives?
Well, those are two different things, right? Like one is the battle, and the other one is come to understand the narratives. Maybe I'll start with the Arabs. Look, I don't believe that there was a historic Palestine, and there is no proof for historic Palestine. And I think that whole lingo is if the Christians and Christianity and Islam had a replacement theology, what they call supersessionism, there's a new way to do it, which is a secular way, which is replacement narrative. It's like I replace your history, I replace who you are, and we're the new Israel. And if you look at the Palestinian Authority and Hamas maps, they look Palestine looks strangely like the borders of the state of Israel. So they're there to just replace Israel with a Palestine, and they're there to talk about the historic Palestine, which never existed. There were Arabs living here. Arabs came here in the year 637, then were kicked out, then came back again in 1267. And then kind of defeated by the Turks, and then they came back under the Jordanians, and they came back because there was Zionism, and Zionism provided work, but there was never historic Palestine in any sovereign type of way. Sometimes it was called Palestine, it's a Roman word, and other times on maps it was called Palestine because it was Syria, Palestina, Greater Palestine, Greater Syria. So when it comes to somebody telling me that there was a Palestine and I am stealing their land, I just say, no, there's no way for me to accept that narrative, and that's a replacement narrative. On the other hand, there's another side to it, which is this region is the region of the Arab peoples, writ large. There are 400 million Arabs here. They have 22 different countries, and that's just Arabs, not Muslims, because Muslims you also have the Turks and the Persians, the Iranians, etc.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I respect the fact that this is their region, and I respect the fact that my country exists within their region, and so therefore I have to somehow understand that they feel differently and understand the situation differently than I do. I'm like some kind of like refugee in a region that's not mine, and I look to America or to Europe or something to connect, and that's a mistake. We have to a lot of times also know that we have to know how to face East. And when we face East, we have to know how to talk East. We have to understand that this is the Arab region. We have to understand the mindset and to accept the fact that we're not going to be able to. We're not going to be able to, and we shouldn't even try to like be messing around with the mindset around here. A great example of messing with the mindset here is when George Bush read Natan Sharansky's book and tried to democratize Iraq. You know, that's just like, what do you think you're coming into a region, you're going to change this whole region's way of doing things? It's not the way of doing things. And look what ended up there. It doesn't work that way. So I respect the Arabs. I respect their sounds. I respect their smells. I respect their foods, and I respect their language. I respect that we have a similar, genetic code. I respect that we're family. And I respect that we have to talk in their language, in their way, which is oftentimes more tribal, more God-related, more spiritual, and also, for example, a respect of land, and the importance of land. And you just have to talk the language of this region. And you have to know that the real language of the region is respect, knowing how to give respect, how to get respect, how to demand respect. And that's the language of this region. And sometimes when Jews are overly Westernized, and not that I diss Westernism, because I think that Westernism is part of our culture, but that's not everything. And you have to deal with the people of the region as they are. You have to respect them, just like Abraham knew. Abraham knew how to open his tent to four sides, to welcome people in, to wash their feet, to talk to them about Allah, about God. But when they kidnapped his nephew, he went to war, and it was no holds barred. So that's when it comes to Arabs. I respect and understand that this is their region, and I respect and understand their milieu. When it comes to fighting a narrative that's trying to take me out, we have to go back to basics. And the problem is that Jewish people are not schooled about how to answer the claims against us. One of my main arguments is that the Hasbara industry does not train you in the actual things that you're going to face. Because what you're going to face is nobody's going to ask you whether Israel is a good guy state or not. Nobody's going to ask you whether you have high tech or cherry tomatoes. Nobody's going to ask you these things. They're going to ask you why you occupied somebody else's land. And if you can't say, this is my historic homeland, and I'm an indigenous person in this land, and I'm a Semitic person, and I speak a Semitic language, and I've been in this region way before Islam came on the scene. And I've had two commonwealths in this land, and these people never had any commonwealths in this land, and the whole world knew it. And if you don't know your Tanakh and your Bible in any sense, forget the religious sense, in a historic sense. If you don't know where we're from, so I'll give you just one example, and then we'll go on to the next things like Hebron. If you don't know that Abraham's first purchase in the land of Israel was Hebron, if you don't know that the forefathers and mothers of our whole tribe, of our peoplehood, are buried in Hebron, if you don't know that King David was first king in Hebron, if you don't know that Jewish people have lived in Hebron for the last 3,500 years almost without break, if you don't know these things and you have no sense of your own history, and somebody comes and tells you, you're occupying somebody else's land, and you believe that, then you're out of the game. You have total narrative inferiority. You got to know your story, and you got to know your narrative, and you got to be strong about it. So that's one of the things that I'm teaching out there.
Sorry.
Go, Jared.
All right. I just wanted to bring up a point because it's kind of difficult to, fight the narrative war when a lot of the narratives against Israel, I guess, if that's the wording I'm going to go with, it is. A lot of them, they're not based in reality. They're based in anti-Semitic notions, or a lot of it. And those are the worst ones that I think need to be fought against. But the thing is, you can't reason with that because it's a conspiratorial way of thinking. So, how do you reason with that? Somebody who just believes
I speak to Arabs a lot. I speak to Arabs a lot, and I tell them, I say to them, Allah loves you. He's given you 22 countries. He's given you 400 million children, and you got oil coming out of the ground. Allah obviously loves you. And they're like, yep. I'm like, but Allah is against your war against the Jews. Look with your own eyes. You have never defeated us in this land. Why? Is it because we're richer than you? Is it because we're bigger than you? Clearly not. It's because Allah is against you. And it's in your own Quran that the Jewish people are going to come back to the land of Israel. And this is our land. And that's why Allah is against your wars. And they're always like, whoa, they like have a slowdown moment. And then sometimes they get back up and they say to me, they go, yes, you're right. But you have left Sinai. You have left South Lebanon. You have left parts of the West Bank. The Temple Mount is not in your control. and you are shrinking. Allah is with us, and we are patient. And this is a key. If you don't understand what I just said, you just don't know what you're doing here in the Middle East. If you don't understand that in the Arab Islamic mind, as we shrink, they understand that their war is going to be successful in the future, that it's a tailwind for the jihadist mindset. If you don't understand that all two-state solution talk only means to them that with time they'll get the rest. If you don't understand that, then you don't understand what you're talking about. And that's what I meant before. You're like a Western thingy talking here, and you just don't get how people are thinking around here. But when you talk to them straight, I'll give you an example. I once had, I used to, when I lived on the Mount of Olives, I basically had to take cabs that were Arab drivers because the Jewish drivers wouldn't drive me home. So if I saw a Jewish driver, I would like wave him along. I didn't want to get into the discussion with him. One time I got into a cab, and this guy was obviously an Islamic, a serious Muslim. He had a serious beard. He had the kippah, the Muslim kippah, the weaved, big white kippah. And I just could see that he's one of the dudes. And I was like, this is going to be great. I got in the car. I said, hey man, where are you from? He said, Isawiya, which is one of the most troublesome areas in Jerusalem. So I said to him, what are you guys giving us such a hard time for in Isawiya all the time? So we got right into it. It was great. So he says to me, it's because you guys don't, you take away the decency and rights of Arabs in the West Bank. So I said to him, if it was up to me, I would give Arabs decency and opportunity to do well and to live here and to have travel papers and all that kind of stuff. I would give them residency. And I always say to Arabs, I go, certainly not citizenship. Not, because
why not?
Right. Well, I'll get to that later. I'm talking to you how I would talk with Arabs. And they all understand it. They understand immediately because they're like, yeah, because they understand that I'm not going to do something dumb to endanger our country like they wouldn't do either. So I'm like, I'm not going to give you citizenship. I'll give you residency. And he's like, oh, that's good. He goes, but you know what, though? He says to me, but you know what? The Temple Mount, Al-Aqsa is a red line. And we'll fight for it. I said to him, good. Let's have a war. Let's have a war about Al-Aqsa, and Allah will decide who wins. How's that? And he was just like, oh my God. He held onto the steering wheel and just looked around for a while. And he had never heard a Jew say to him with clarity, it's a red line for you. It's a red line for me. Let's make a war about it, and Allah will decide who wins. How does that? And that's talking Middle East. That's talking Middle, not like, oh, it's a red line for you. Gosh, well, I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to move you and this, that. Just talk the way it is. It's important to you. It's just as important to me.
So
and we're gonna duke it out.
I have to ask because I feel like with this conversation, one thing we're kind of ignoring is that even from a completely secular perspective, right? We've here in this podcast talked with Palestinian Christians who are very intense about it, and Palestinian atheists who are extremely intense about it. And I think part of the situation is that we are having our military rule over a people and enforce laws on a people who don't have citizenship, and that's inherently undemocratic, right?
So is this a democratic region?
Should aspire to be.
So I guess my
Why
question
do you say
for
that?
you is that
you aspire to be a white European country?
You don't need to be a white European to be a Democrat. Sorry, I'm sorry.
I don't know. I just don't know. I just don't know any Arab countries.
Would you prefer to not live in a democracy?
I just don't know of any Arab Middle East countries that are democratic. So can you give me one example of a
kind of getting there?
Tunisia is the one unique one, but Tunisians aren't even exactly Arabs. But in any case, like the point is made, which is that really this is not a democratic region. So am I trying to institute some kind of
So would you prefer we become should the Israeli government be a dictatorship in your opinion? Should
no?
We do
there's
that?
a big difference. There's a big difference between dictatorship and what I'm talking about. What I'm talking, like for example, our synagogue. My synagogue is a democracy, and we vote on stuff. But it's not everybody can join and take over our synagogue. It's a democracy of a limited fashion for the people that are inside.
Practical reality.
Let me finish off. The simple thing here. First thing. Let's get the ground rules straight. This is the Middle East, and I don't understand how is it that we come to an understanding that this is the Middle East, it's the Middle East region. Suddenly we throw in democracy like it's a co-equal value with everything. This is not a democratic region. Understand that and accept that Israel is a protectorate amongst the Islamic world. It's here to protect a minority people. That's how I understand Israel. It's a Jewish state, an ethnic protectorate, a ethnic national state. By the way, there are many ethnic national states in the world, like Poland, like Hungary, like Iceland, like Azerbaijan, like Japan. Sure. There are many, many ethnic national states. Israel's an ethnic national state, a tiny little blip inside a totally non-democratic Middle East. And everybody here in the Middle East rules over minorities militarily. Everybody, every single country rules over minorities militarily. And we have a minority in our country. They should live and be well and have upward mobility and success. But I'm not here to provide democracy for them. What kind
but they're not
like,
are they
what kind of Western implant do you think that we should be here? But
if you look at the entire land, including Gaza and the West Bank, it's about 50-50.
Yep, you're right. That's a big problem. That's the number one problem, and I appreciate that very much. And I agree with you. And I'm kind of like impressed that you kind of like whip out that number 1, 2, 3. That is, I think, one of the most problematic and truth and one of the things that keeps me up at night is that our ethnic national state is being really overrun. But the way to defeat it is not to give up more of its sovereignty and give up more of its and just change the goalposts, move the goalposts so that therefore you could make a dual national state and succumb all the way. The people who have created the situation are the people that have had value systems that are internally conflicting, Jewish and democratic. What does that mean, Jewish and democratic? Does that mean that it's an ethnic national state and also a democracy for all? Those things cannot coexist. My understanding is Jewish and democratic means like Japan. It's a Japanese state. It's got a democracy for that ethnic group because that's what was envisioned in the idea of birth of nations, of self-determination. But P.S., if you have other people that want to join your nation, not necessarily religiously, but let's say like the Druze, they're like, listen, we stand with you, we swear allegiance to you. Then we could talk about, citizenship or pathway to citizenship or all kinds of other, formulations. But today, Israeli Arabs, so many of them are standing, shoulder to shoulder with Palestinianism, which wants to wipe out Israel. We saw that in the last conflict. We saw that in Israeli Arab cities. We see that right now with these prisoners that have escaped and how much support they have amongst Israeli Arabs. And I tell Israeli Arabs, I'm like, why do you even call yourself Israeli? Aren't you pro-Palestinian? They're like, yeah, but we have Israeli citizenship. I'm like, but you, when do you think the occupation started? They're like 1948. I'm like, you don't believe that there's any legitimate right for the Jewish state to exist. You just enjoy its privileges and you would be happy to undermine its state. Why don't you just say with the truth? You're not Israeli. Now, there are some people, there are Arabs and there are Muslims and there are Druze and others who do feel strong about Israel and will support it. Those people I'll bring into my nation. But the people who are antithetical to my nation, why should my little protectorate give them equality to undermine our country? It's absurd. And that situation that you're talking about is a big mistake. We should not allow these people to immigrate in. Do you know that one of the principles of jihad is immigration? Immigration is literally a principle of Islamic jihad. It's like in the ancient books of Islam. It's one of the ways that you win. And we are allowing that to happen all over the West Bank and in Israeli cities and happen in Gaza and we're shrinking. And that's how they see it. They see us shrinking.
Okay, so let's say theoretically you're correct. Every Palestinian that exists in the area, every single one, they all came literally in 1947. The reality is, even if that's true, you have a lot of innocent children who are just born here.
Sure.
Majority, they didn't choose to be born here. They've lived their whole lives under, most of them under some sort of Israeli sovereignty. And there are situations, for example, in the West Bank where I know that Palestinians don't get the same water resources that maybe Israeli settlers do. Is that something that a Jewish state, is that what we want?
No, that's not what we want. And I agree with you. Let me be very clear. I'm a so-called right winger or settler or conservative, all these titles. The truth is I'm a nationalist, a Jewish nationalist. And for me, everybody that's going to be under our sovereignty deserves decency and opportunity dignity, and what I call barakah, which is the Arabic word for blessing. Everybody that lives in our country, let's say they be residents, okay? They deserve, I was a resident in America for many years with a pathway to citizenship in that case. But in this case, I say, let's say you're a resident. You deserve great roads, great water, great opportunity, great entrance to colleges and medical school and whatever you want. You should be treated with a lot of love and respect as a welcomed part of our nation, as long, of course, as you are allied with us, as you have allegiance to Israel, to the Jewish state.
If I can interject, are you including like the idea of human rights codified into law for these residents?
Sure.
Say, in this
sure.
situation?
I would call that a Bill of Rights. I'm going to say something which is like sounds very like shocking to Western ears, but I think it's perfectly sensical in the Middle East. I talk about dignity, opportunity, blessings, but not equality. There's no equality. Equality, if you want equality, you can move to one of the Arab states where we have never had any equality. There's no equality in this region. This is our tribal ethnic land. And you can have blessings in this place and you will succeed and do very well. And we will appreciate you. But you have to accept the fact that this is a Jewish state and you're a part of our nation that's plugged in. And maybe your father and maybe your grandfather owned a parcel of land which you live on and you deserve to live in there well. But if you are trying to undermine our state, if you talk jihadism in your mosques, if you believe that Israel, shouldn't exist, etc., and you want to either you even tacitly, want to undermine it, then you should not have the privileges of the state of Israel. Equality, and I tell this, I want you to know that I always speak to Arabs with great truthfulness. I say to them, I want you to be blessed, but don't talk to me about equality because that's not going to happen. Just like I don't have equality in your lands. You're going to have decency and opportunity, but not equality. Equality, you want equality as an Arab person, you have 22 states. This is a tiny protectorate, and we can't allow you to, undermine it. That doesn't sound beautiful, but what I always get compliments on is that people are like, at least you're being truthful with me, and you're not giving me some kind of BS formula wherein some, yes, they're equal citizens, but still it's a Jewish state, so let's kind of push them out, and or let's gerrymander the borders so that there's less of them around, so we could still be a Jewish state, Jewish and democratic. It's always like maneuvering to make all of these different value systems like harmonize. They don't harmonize. This isn't a democratic region. This is an ethnic national region. All the countries around us are ethnic Arab states that have no democracy. And there's no reason that my forefathers came and mothers came out of the Holocaust and came to this land and were like, oh, do you think that they said, oh, let's now build a democracy for the Arabs? Hell no, that is not what this thing is about. And this is not because I hate Arabs. I actually like Arabs. And when you put it into that kind of clarity, then people are like, okay, I know my roles. I know where I'm supposed to live. I know where he's supposed to live. I know how I'm supposed to understand each other in society. And we can make sense of this thing. Without that, the Jewish gobbledygook of making it all like it's both democratic and yet it's Jewish. And well, on the other hand, there's all these other people and they have their version of things. And maybe Palestine is a joint narrative. You start all that stuff, you end up down the road of just losing your identity and losing your land. And that's what's happening right now. We are not clear about our identity. We are not clear about our rights. We are not clear about our borders. And that's why you have such a mess around here. My system would give Arabs opportunity, okay? But it would still be clear that this is our land.
Why would Arabs want to accept that, though?
That's not my problem. If they don't want to accept it, they don't have to. There are many Arabs who want a good future for their kids and want good water in their pipes and respect the fact that we respect them and maybe are not maximalist in their Islamic thinking. Those that don't like it, that's fine. I'm not here to create a whole world for the Arabs. That's what I was saying to you from the get-go. Why would they accept it? They don't have to. If they don't want to accept it, they should not be here.
So
that's
you would
exactly
just prefer like a war with the people who don't want to accept that?
No, I would prefer to help. I would prefer first thing, we have a war for the people who don't accept it. What does that mean, prefer? I don't prefer that. That's my reality. That's another thing.
Active fighting.
No, I don't prefer active fighting.
Well, you would prefer a war over like a democratic solution.
There is no democratic solution other than us leaving this place and being totally overrun. There is no
See,
democratic solution.
really
If you want a solution is give the people that want to live with us residency. We can discuss if it's residency with a pathway to citizenship or not. I prefer not, but I can also understand the people who prefer yes. We can discuss that as well, the technicalities of that. But I prefer that the people who hate this country and want to undermine it, we should help resettle them by giving them money and helping them find a life. We should, by the way, pay all the people who are refugees or see them or understand themselves as refugees. At least we should find some criterion. We should be like, listen, if you lost your house, here's reparations. I want to pay you reparations. I don't want a situation where people like, you stole their land. I'm like, no, listen, war happened. They had to flee, all that. Let's pay them reparations and let's make it fair. We have a wealthy country. Let's pay off what we owe if that's the case. But this small parcel of land is not going to be shared by two different narratives of who's the owner of this land. And I think that all the other type of solutions have been proven failures. If it's land giveaway unilaterally like Gaza, proven failure. If it's efforts, right? If it's efforts towards a two-state solution where we're sitting down and talking and we're empowering all kinds of local chieftains and bad guys and strong men, it's all gone totally south on us. We have not had one of these deals that has worked out well. Maybe.
Yeah, sorry, Yishai. I just want to interject there because I do tend to agree with you. The fact that Oslo has only led to more bloodshed and to the second Intifada, and it just goes on. And like you said, the unilateral withdrawal from Gaza has led to round after round after round of fighting. And I'm originally from a little kibbutz in the south, and rockets being peppered. And even segregation within Israeli society, people in central Israel saying, oh, we don't care about, the rockets don't come anywhere close to us. Even Ehud Olmert himself, said, oh, he doesn't lose any sleep at night because of Hamas. And that really made me angry. So Ehud Olmert's fine sleeping in his bed wherever he is. But the citizens of Sderot and all the moshavim and kibbutzim in the area are being peppered day in, day out. Our fields are being burnt by balloons. I don't think people really understand the issue here. And obviously it is very, very, very complex. And we have so many different factors going on, and it's ongoing. We recently had the prison break. Unfortunately, 6 people with blood on their hands managed to get out. It's just a Pandora's box waiting to explode, Yishai. My issue is that we have extremists on our side. They have extremists on their side that are the ones that are kind of keeping this whole tinderbox alight all the time. There's always something going on. And it's the innocent civilians on both sides that are trapped in the middle of this and that suffer from it. So just for an example of Jewish extremism and things that make me sick to my stomach, you had a wedding. This was a while ago. This was a few years ago. A wedding I think it was in the West Bank, and you had Jewish teenagers stabbing a picture of the Dawabshe family that was firebombed, and I believe the baby was burnt to death in that attack. Right? It's absolutely sickening behavior for me. And on the Palestinian side, you have, just so people are aware, you have kids in Gaza dressed up in militant suits running around with plastic Kalashnikov saying, let's go kill Jews, kill Yahud, Idbah al-Yahud. We cannot continue to allow these people to function within our society and they have to deal with the issue on their side. From your experience of living over there in the West Bank, and dealing with so many Israelis and Palestinians, how can we tackle this issue, these extremists that keep twisting the knife and adding fuel to the fire?
The first thing is that this language of extremism, it's a little bit of a Western type language, and I don't know if it fits here. The stuff of what you call extremism on the Arab side is being taught day in, day out. It's on PA TV. It's in the PA Twitter, PLO Twitter. It's just part of the, it's not extremism, therefore it's normative. That is what these folks believe. And right now, these escaped prisoners, the whole Arab, in the Israeli Arabs and the Palestinian Arabs are all supporting these guys. There's tons of public support for them.
But how much of it?
But I'm just saying, let's not like call it extremism. And on our side, look, we are a highly defensive country that has seen 30,000 of our people killed in wars and in terrorism. And our wives are driving on roads where they're being struck with rocks and fire bombs, etc. And so, there's going to be people that are pissed off. And I'm not justifying that, but I'm just like, look, this is a conflict zone. And it's not like if you're going to take away like Mahmoud Abbas isn't by your definition an extremist, and so therefore the Hamas are super extremist, and the average Palestinian that buys into this stuff, they believe that Israel is not a legitimate entity. Now, by the way, this is not always true. For example, in Hebron, we have a clan called the Jabri clan, which are very friendly with us. I was just talking to one of the members today, and many of my friends like Yehuda Cohen and like Yinon, Dan Kahati are working very hard, and my friend Rudy Rockman, who's working very hard to find common ground, to have discussion, to have talk. I myself deal with Arabs all the time who detest the jihad and detest the PA and the Hamas and detest their corruption and detest the brainwashing of their kids. And they say to me all the time, they say, Yishai, when are you guys going to take over this area? And when are you guys going to give us residency? We don't even want citizenship. Give us the residency so we can be protected by your laws and have upward mobility. That's what we want. Help us, protect us from these guys. Here comes Israel. We bring in the PLO. We brought in the PLO.
Them? How do you strengthen those guys?
My country, Israel today, does not strengthen those guys. It strengthens the other guys, the suppressive guys. And that's the truth. If you say to me, Yishai, would you agree with the following statement that Israel abuses and subjects the Palestinians? I say yes, it is true. When we empower the PLO PA, when we allow them to rule, P.S. we allow the Hamas to rule as well. We don't take them out, right? We actually gave them the land, right? We gave it to the PLO, which ended up giving it to the Hamas. These guys, they are not legitimate. They suppress their own people, and there are people out there that want to fight against that, but we don't support those people. We support the regime of the PLO, of the PA. Why? Because they keep a lid on things for us, and we have a working relationship with them. Those Israelis that have a working relationship with the PLO, they are not my Israelis. I'm in conflict in many ways with them. Okay, what I want to do is make one land, which is from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. It's pretty clear. I want to give residency to decent people. I want the people who detest Israel not to be here one way or another, to find a way out. I want to pay them reparations or find a way out. I want to give people an opportunity to live in this land. And yes, I want to rule in this land, a benevolent rule, but a rule of upward mobility. And by the way, we forgot to mention the Abraham Accords and the UAE. What do you think the UAE wants? They've got a problem with Iran. They got a problem with Qatar. They got a problem with Islamic extremism, speaking of that word. And they're like, Israel, be a badass, kick some ass, kick the Hamas, kick them out, because this Muslim Brotherhood is the same thing as the Qatar. They have a big problem for us. We want to move forward in this region. So kick some ass like you're supposed to, like Fauda style, like take care of business. But we don't do it. And we're like, democracy, blah, 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 and equality. And we don't understand the rules of the Middle East. So we don't take care of the bad guys. We let them suppress the good guys with tremendous violence. And we're ninny-ish. We're ninny-ish instead of being robust and assertive and aggressive and holding on to our land. And if you hear a mosque, preaching jihadism, you close that thing down, 1, 2, 3. And you certainly don't allow the jihad to rule on the Temple Mount. What do I mean by that? We have a situation that the holiest place for the Jewish people in the holiest city, in the central thing, the whole thing, what it's all about, which is, the two temples that stood here, and it's not just a religion, it's the symbolism of Jewish strength and our capital. In our capital, we are not allowed to pray on our Temple Mount. We're not allowed to move our lips in prayer because that's what the jihad wants. So the state of Israel upholds those values. Now, you can't be a serious player in the Middle East if you're going to uphold the values of the other guy. They're laughing at you. And the UAE is like, the UAE folks are like, what's wrong with you guys? Why don't you understand how to like work around here? You got to be bad on the bad guys. You got to crush those bad guys
So
that the good guys can flourish.
My question for you is you say that like Palestinians would want this like benevolent
Some
Palestinians, but then
Some.
we see, honestly, my experience with every Palestinian I've spoken to, literally every single one, and even the most moderate ones, Palestinians with Israeli citizenship, all of them feel discriminated against in Israel. I've never
they are
talked
discriminated against.
They don't want this.
Well, first thing is that under a regime that I would like to see, then that kind of regime would be clear. It wouldn't be discrimination. You would just understand that you are a welcomed part of the nation, but this is a Jewish state, and since we're a defensive country, it's not an open for everybody. It's a Jewish state, just like the UAE is ruled by their clans, for example, or any really country in the Middle East. But we would give opportunity. It's kind of funny when Arabs in general talk about discrimination. Their whole system of their whole region is based on discrimination. They discriminate against Palestinians in Jordan. They discriminate against Palestinians in Lebanon. They discriminated them against in Syria. They're like, the whole region is like such a, they have no sense of democracy whatsoever. And then they come to you and you're like, why don't you give me democracy? It's like, bro. And then when you have democracy, when the Arabs in Israel use the democracy, they have these parties that are plainly hateful to Israel. Ayman Uda, I know him personally. I practically grew up with him in Haifa. I know him well. And like, the dude has received everything from the state of Israel. He lives in the nicest part of the state of Israel, Haifa, in Kfar Kababir over there. He's gone to the best schools, and yet he spits in the face. He's in our Knesset. He gets paid 45,000 shekel a month. Okay,
with
like
our
10,000.
money.
Yeah, with our money. And he spits in the face of Israel day in, day out. So how can you try to convince me now that democracy for the Arabs is such a beautiful thing? It's his right. Maybe it's his right.
I'm not following the logic here, because I don't.
If I can make an interjection, because let's see, we're on about 46 minutes now.
We're just getting warmed up.
Yeah, we're just getting warmed up, but I want to shift it to a little debate, because I'm just going to have to say, remember this. I respect you. I listen to what you're saying. I want to get into a little debate part here. Just because bad things are happening in other countries in the region does not mean we should do the same. If there's another kid who's running around punching other kids, stealing from the store, should I go do that? Should I go do that? Should your kids do that? Should my kids do that? Should my little brother go do that? This region may not have a history of democracy, but not that far long ago, only like a couple centuries ago, Europe was all monarchies. And 70 years ago, it was pretty fucking fascist. Democracy doesn't need to have a history there. It can be introduced, and we should always strive for it. Maybe that's just me and my personal preference and my morals and values, but democracy is important to me, and I feel like we should have that in this country for everyone who lives here. And I agree with you that if people who aren't citizens don't wish to be a part of our country, then we shouldn't just force citizenship upon them and they shouldn't have it. But if there's somebody who is willing to be a part of the country, be a part of our culture and our society, they should absolutely have citizenship, and we should call them our fellow citizens and welcome them under our flag. Regardless of their ethnicity or religion.
Can you hear me? Because I had some problem with my mic. Can you hear me?
It was cutting out a bit.
I'll tell you what. The word citizenship is a very broad word, and what do you mean by citizenship? Like, to me, the word citizenship could mean something a little bit broader, which is like, do you mean that necessarily citizenship means that you have a passport and then you vote and all kind? Like, I'll give you an example. Puerto Rico. Now, people don't always like it when I give that example, but it's a very important example. Puerto Rico is an American territory, and these guys are Americans, but they actually don't have the right to vote for an American president. And they in Puerto Rico, correct. And that's right. But they do vote for congressmen and senators, but those congressmen and senators are non-voting congressmen and senators. So they are represented, but those people don't have the same kind of powers to vote in Congress and in the Senate. So that goes to show you now, what is the danger of 2 million Puerto Ricans to the American system? Nothing. But for some reason, for historical reason, they've come to this kind of conclusion. And that's like one of the most democratic countries in the world. Here, where we're a tiny country inside of their region, which has been hostile to us from day one, to say like, let's give everybody equality is to put on blindfolds and to be like, everything is going to be fine if we just, because we have this value system. This is a tough region. This is much more like jail than it is, regular society. It's much more like the kind of like democracy that you have in jail. It's like a tough society. Sometimes you got to fight to prove that you can push back the bad guys. There's only two kinds of minorities in our region: armed and unarmed. And Israel's an armed minority. The unarmed minorities are the ones that are decimated all the time. We're an armed minority. We exist in this tough place. We're much more like the Kurds than anybody else. We have a tiny autonomy within this region. To now bring your American values and be like, well, but I like democracy because it's important to my value system. Well, that's fine. But we're not going to be able to survive like that. We're going to be undermined. And that's
yeah, but it's not even just democracy, right? You have the Israeli government is literally, I mean, in this war, we've killed lots and lots of children. So it is really serious,
I'm sorry. We have not killed lots and lots of children. The children do die in all conflict, but in our region, in Israel, what happens in 1 year of inner city Chicago, there are more deaths in inner city Chicago and children's deaths than there are in this whole conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. Not to minimize every single life lost, but let's not blow it up. You know what I mean? You want to see dead Arabs? That's what happens that's what just happened in Syria, where maybe 500,000 people were murdered and 2 million people displaced, and nobody gave a damn about it. You know what pisses me? I just want to tell you. You know what pisses me off to no end? Pisses me off to no end. There's an ancient culture nearby. It's called the Iranians, and they've been like suppressed by an Islamic rule, and they go and protest in the streets, and they're literally shot and killed for protesting in the streets, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. These guys are like, give me freedom, and nobody cares. Here in our land, the situation is reversed. The Palestinians today are a type of front for the jihad. They're trying to undermine our history, our narrative, our rights, and they do it through this, the jihad puts on the clothing of human rights and social justice and all that, and then they present to the world like they're the miskinim, like they're being decimated day in day out. It's not the truth. Arabs are wealthy in Hebron. They export 5 million shekels of products. 5 billion shekels of products a year to Israel. The wealth that's down in the Hebron area is unbelievable. They have, you could see it by the new bags that the women are wearing in Hebron. You could see it by the life. The mall in Hebron has a Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's one of the biggest malls in the whole Middle East, and you could just see it online. Don't take my word for it. And so the Palestinians present to the Arab world Hebron as the high-tech capital of the West Bank. And then to Israel and to the Western world, they present it as like, look, we're broken and we're poor, and the tiny Israeli settlement of 90 families, destroys our whole life here in this 20 square kilometer city. So there's a lot of bullshit out there. There's just a lot of lies. I won't be like, I won't allow, I can't accept this idea that a lot of kids are dead. You know where that comes from? And I'm sure you didn't mean it that way, so please don't take it. I'm not referring to you personally in any way. I'm just saying, when I hear that in the news, what I think of is blood libel. I think of like, wow, they want to say the Jews kill children indiscriminately. Is that true? Does Israel kill Jews indiscriminately? No. I don't think it is true. I don't think it is true.
I just want to bring up a statistic because I think you gave some false numbers there. But over the course of the conflict, we've had 25,000 Jewish and Israeli deaths and 90,000 Palestinian deaths, according to Jewish Virtual Library. So that's a lot of people. It's not like a small number, and it's not certainly like the south side of Chicago.
90,000 Palestinians dead. I've never heard that number, but
I can send you the link
here. I believe you. I believe you.
I'm not sure. It might include combatants as well.
Right. I feel like we're talking about.
Yeah, it's not.
Listen,
it could be including the Egyptian army, the Jordanians.
Right. I think it includes like the wars. Right. Look, I want to tell you something. I'm not making light of it. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not in any way trying to like minimize that there's a conflict here. Quite the opposite. I've said throughout the whole time, we have a conflict here. Like, I'm not trying to say to you that like, and armies are rough things. They're instruments of violence. And Israeli army is an instrument of violence. It is. and it's meant to do that. It's meant to try to suppress violence against us, and it's meant to be aggressive and push back. For us as Jews, 2 days of Auschwitz equaled more deaths than all of our conflicts with the Arabs in the last 100 years. Yeah. But anyway, numbers of people. It's not to minimize it. I'm actually trying to give a solution forward. My solution forward is clarity. I'm always trying to talk about clarity. I'm always trying to give to simplify things, to make it a little bit more clear where the boundaries are. I say, and I wanted to say this earlier, I say to you as a conservative, as a sovereign, as a nationalist, every person who's under my sovereignty, we have to treat decently. Like 100%. As a person who wants a bigger sovereign Israel, I'm not talking about mistreating our Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims. I'm talking about treating them better. Like under my regime, the type of regime I'm describing, it wouldn't be that there's a Palestinian Authority that we kind of tacitly support and it suppresses the people. I think that's disgusting. I really do. I would like to see decent people have decent opportunity. But those people who don't want that opportunity, I think we should pay them off and help them have a life somewhere else. Those people who want to live in Israel, accept the fact that it's a Jewish state, do not enter. Do not allow jihadism to enter their teachings and their children's education, etc. And they want to live here a decent and productive life. We're going to facilitate that. We're going to facilitate that. I want to give you an example. I met an Arab recently in Hebron. We have these monthly meetings with Arabs. They're clandestine. Obviously, by the way, you know that when we meet Arabs, there's nothing more good for me than taking a selfie and putting it on Twitter and then showing people like you, in a good way, I mean this, that I'm dealing monthly with Arabs and talking with them about a way forward. But you know what? I can't put up those pictures, right? Because those guys will die at the hands of the PA. So we literally
have the same problem, Yishai. We have the same issue as well.
Right.
With
well, let me just finish this off, which is I'm just pointing out to you that I would love to show you the normalization efforts that we make, but I can't do it, which is sad for me and sad for my ability to tell the narrative. Any case, I had a guy we met at the gas station of Kiryat Arba. It wasn't just me and him. It was a few people, but he says to me, Yishai, just give me Israeli residency. Just give me the blue card and my son will serve in your army. Okay. He goes to me, I don't want your citizenship. I understand that scares you. Just give me residency. Let me live a good and decent life because that's all I want. And my son will defend your country. And it wasn't because he's an Uncle Tom. I don't know him. He doesn't owe anything to me. There's no favors here. There's nothing. He's telling me his real truth. I meet people like that all the time that are tired, but they're afraid to say it. And so you can't hear it. And they're certainly not going to say it on, in a public sphere and allow themselves to be destroyed by the Palestinian Authority. Under a regime that I'm describing, they would have more opportunities and more rights, but with the clarity of their standing in society.
The issue I'm having, right, Yishai, with what you're painting, it's kind of going back to it's almost like a kibbutz utopia. We're going to create this, forget the socialism, but we're going to create a lovely utopia here where everything's going to work and you're going to be under Israeli law and you'll be able to celebrate all your religious celebrations. You'll have residency, but you won't be able to vote in government. It sounds a little
or maybe you'll have some
fantastical.
kind of representation. Maybe you will have a representative in Knesset, but he may not be necessarily a voting representative. We might find some formula.
Okay, so kind of like a tribal head of a clan or something that comes in and I see where you're coming from. So just to get things clear, is your plan similar to Kedar's plan that he came up with, the Palestinian Emirates plan? Is that something that you endorse?
Well, okay. So first thing is that I wrote an article. I could see it's hanging on my wall here in the New York Times a few years ago already. It was called "A Settler's View of Israel's Future," and I laid out 5 alternatives to the two-state solution. Mm-hmm. One of them was the Kedar plan. Kedar says, let's give them emirates within Israel. They have these big cities that are basically already emirates, and let them rule those cities. Now I say, that's great. I have no problem with Hebron being a Palestinian emirate, but I wouldn't give it sovereignty. I would say, okay, you guys have your judges, your governor, your ways of dealing with things, but you're Israeli residents. And so therefore you cannot have jihadism being taught within Hebron, but you will culturally, you will not feel the incursion of Israel in your lives. You will feel it that it's Palestinian, it's Muslim, it's Arab. You will feel Arab. You will feel that it's your Chinatown. It's your way of doing things, but it's still under the sovereignty of Israel. But it's your style judges. It's your style governor. It's your style of doing things. But of course, underneath it, you pay your taxes, your Arnona taxes to the state of Israel. Yes, I think that's that's one of the acceptable ways to move forward. And that could alleviate a lot of, they'll have residency of Israel. They'll have voting within their town, within their world. Great. Okay. That's totally a decent formula. Again, the caveat is no jihadism, no hate of Israel talk, no teaching of the hate of Israel. If you do that, then we're not allies. Then I can't have you in our land like that.
So maybe something like that could have worked, maybe pre-disengagement. I'm thinking, but once we left Gaza and kind of set a precursor to the two-state solution, and since then it's just been.
We did the opposite of setting up a precursor. We proved how stupid it would be to give away land to your enemies without having our military there, without having our life there. First thing, we gave away our land. It's our historic homeland, and that's like a point that I'm not going to give in on. It's our ancestral land. When we did that, we made a big mistake of strengthening the jihad. But the only positive thing that came out of the Gaza experience was that we showed the Israelis how stupid it is to give away land. So when I was at the White House and I was presenting before, when they were coming up with the Trump plan, they asked the people to come and present. So I said to them, look, here's what you did in Gaza. We pulled out of Gaza. We created a Hamas stand. If we pull out of Hebron, we're going to create the same exact thing there. And then there'll be rockets on Jerusalem. It'll destroy the country. And they're like, okay, my point is that average Israelis understood that land giveaway is incredibly dangerous. So to me, it wasn't a precedent for two-state solution. It was a precedent for why not to do the two-state solution. And that's what the polls and the voting shows, that people became more wary of a two-state solution after Gaza.
No, what I meant was not a precedent, a precursor. Like they were trying to say, okay, we're stepping out. It's going to be two states. You're going to, and to me, someone I'm from the South originally, Yishai. My granddad had dealings in Gaza his whole life. It wasn't as extreme as it is today at all. Israelis could go and visit. I'm sure you've probably been there yourself.
Many times.
Yeah, and
it's vacation there.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's so sad, the point that we've got to today. And honestly, I'm done blaming the other side, because I can't put the blame over there and say, oh, it's always. No, it's what we're doing here, Yishai, and it's our mistakes that we've made along the way, including Oslo, including the disengagement, and including the same mistake we made with these prisoners that have just escaped now and are on the loose. I'm going up to that region tomorrow. It annoys me, So
Amir, I couldn't agree any more with you. If you notice, by the way, I'm not a big Arab blamer. I'm not into blaming Arabs. I think that the biggest blame is that when you just act unregionally in our region, you make yourself into a foreign entity, and you don't understand how things work around here. And you don't give away land in this region. It's something that's not done. A tribe would never, ever give away its land. When you give away land, the Arabs think to themselves, you are a worthless opponent. You have no honor. You're honorless. And
look,
we look what we did in Gaza. We gave away our beautiful beachside property where Jews have lived for thousands of years, and what did we allow to happen there? It's one of the most painful things. We're not going to get into this, but I think that Sinai was the greatest mistake. But I don't know if we have time to talk about that.
No, we don't really have time. But that's just what I wanted to ask you about the whole Sinai thing, because it is such a beautiful, beautiful region.
Sinai was never Egyptian. That's the bottom line. It's a British invention. God bless
London.
Before we get into that, fellas, because like you said before, we kind of don't have the time.
I'll make it in half a statement. Sinai was never Egyptian. Remember in the Bible, when the Jews leave Egypt, they go to Sinai because Sinai is not Egypt. Okay, Sinai, the Egyptians should always control the Suez Canal, but the Sinai has been given in our hands many times. It was never Egyptian. It's like a British invention, and we need it for strategic depth. We need it for those oil fields. We need it to control the sea lanes, and a bigger Israel is a better thing for this region. If we had control of Sharm el Sheikh, we have submarines already in the air, in the Gulf, and we'd have in the Indian Sea, and we'd be patrolling, and we'd have a more stable region, and Iran would be more subdued. There wouldn't be African migrants running through the Sinai into Israel. Gaza wouldn't be able to get rockets and stuff like that. I'm a believer in a stronger, bigger Israel, not to endless proportions, but the Sinai. If you look at the Negev, you see that it's a completely fake line. The Sinai is a normative part of what the state of Israel should look like. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Okay.
Before we end, anybody, is there anyone who has some more final remarks, not about the Sinai, before we sign off?
I just want to thank Yishai for coming on and sharing his views. And I know that some people may find your views to be controversial. I don't at all, Yishai. I really respect you and the fact that you come on our show and have an honest discussion. I think that's what we're missing. I was earlier watching the Knesset, the discussion, and it was just people shouting over each other. And I was thinking, what is this? This isn't, you're not going to, nothing's going to work properly here if this is the way we're communicating with each other. So I just want to thank you for coming on. You're obviously welcome anytime to come back. And if you do have any Palestinian friends that, I mean, obviously we can hide their face on the show. Be happy to bring you on and have another chat. So thanks a lot.
I want to thank you guys also. I have to agree with you about the lack of civil conversation and really also the lack of honesty. There's not a lot of honesty out there. And I try to be more honest. And I think that honesty clears the air. And I think and a lot of times when I'm arguing with Arabs, I tell them, stop it. Just like be honest about what you feel about this thing. Tell me what you really feel. Like, don't be don't pander, say the truth. Don't give me this, human rights stuff. Tell me what you really think about Israel. And when I challenge them, a lot of times things come out for good and for bad. But I agree with you that honesty is a very lacking commodity around here. And not everybody likes what I say, but I think that people come out being like, okay, like there's a clarity there. You know what I mean? There's a clarity there, and there's a totality of thinking. A lot of also Israeli thinkers, they just like stop somewhere. You know what I mean? Because they know that like these values will somewhere like collide. So they'll stop. Like they don't want to deal with what's going on in Israeli Arab cities, and they don't want to look at the Gaza situation and what happened there. And so they leave you in a kind of fog, and that's where they stop. They stop in a fog. And I think that's a mistake. I think this region can move forward. Right now, there's a few regressive markers. I think that China is empowering Iran. I think that the Afghanistan thing has empowered the jihad. I think that the UAE is disappointed in our lack of strength. I think that the Israeli Arabs are getting emboldened in the wrong direction, and we have not made it clear to them that we demand allegiance. We have not made that clear. For example, in half of the schools in East Jerusalem, they teach the Palestinian Authority curriculum under Israel. Teach this hateful anti-Israel stuff in schools that are basically funded by Israel. So when we do that, when we're weak, it stinks, and people pick up on the scent and they attack it. And I think that a strong Israel is not only better for the Jews, it's better for the regional Arabs and better for the world. And as we say, inshallah, Allah ma'ak, God be with you. May Hashem be with us, and we're going to keep fighting for a better future.
Yeah.
Alevai.
But on this show, we only have one God, and that is the thunderstrike of righteousness.
What's that?
Oh, I am the one God on this show. I'm the God of this show.
Well, you're the regional strongman. I think we could say it that way.
Well, if I'm strong enough and if I keep you guys isolated enough, I can tell you what I want. You kind of just have to believe me.
I bet you that Anna's even stronger than you think.
Oh
God
no,
bless
she
you
doesn't.
guys.
She doesn't exist. I created
No.
her. She's just a figment of your collective imaginations.
Well, Yishai, Anna is
We're
perfect.
starting to delve into weird parts here at the end of the show.
No, one thing, Anna is definitely, she's just finished university, so she deserves a big congratulations for graduating.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
and hopefully, inshallah, alevai, we can get her over here to Israel as well, to the Holy Land. I'm sure you'd have a great time over here, Anna.
It's where it's all happening.
Yeah, get all of us in the same room for once.
For once.
That'd be cool.
I'd like some of that hookah next time as well. That's right.
Oh, I'll bring extra tobacco. Let's see it. Right now, I got lemon, mint, and blueberry. What do you want?
That sounds
lovely.
great.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Just keep it exciting.
good.
You know what I'm saying?
I like it. All right. So, Amir, are you ready?
I'm ready, bro.
Are you ready to receive my message, my prophet?
We get a bit silly.